Hey guys, this video is going to go over the real set FRQ. This one had three parts, but honestly, it went pretty quickly. So the first question has us working in the interval class, and something I want to point out that in this class we have two variables. We have the upper and the lower, and an interval is basically just looking at all of the real numbers between this lower and upper value that is set. Now, the lower and the upper are not included. Okay, so when we're going to look at this contains method that we're writing for question one, we're not including the lower or the upper. The contains method that we're writing down here is looking to see if it's between the upper and the lower. So really, this is a pretty straightforward method. We want to check to see if this value that we're giving it is in the interval. Now, notice that this should return a Boolean. So all we need to do here is we need to write an if statement. Okay, if the value that we're giving our method here is less than the upper, and if that same value is greater than the lower, then that means that this number, this value, is contained in the interval. Okay, so that means that we need to return true because that value was found in the interval. If it's not true, we're going to return false. And that's all there is to this method. Okay, notice that this was strictly less than and strictly greater than. It's not equal to because we're not including the upper and the lower. We're looking between those values. We're not including those end points, those end values. So that's all you had to do for question one. Okay, pretty straightforward. The next two questions are working inside of the open set class. And what we're doing for question two is we're building the contains method for this class. Now, the difference here is that instead of looking in just one interval, we have an array list of a bunch of intervals. Okay, and the name of that array list is intervals that you see here. Now, what our contains method should do this time is it should actually loop through all of the intervals in this array list, and it should check to see if this value, VAL here, is contained in any of the intervals in that array list. So it's not that much harder, it's just that we have an array list that we need to loop through this time. So I'm going to use a for each loop. I'm going to say for each interval, and I'm just going to use V here, you can use whatever you want, in that intervals array list, we're going to go through and we're going to see if that interval contains this value. Now, because we're looking at a bunch of intervals here, we can use the contains method that we already wrote in the interval class. So this method's already written. It's checking to see if that value is inside of an interval. So in our open set class, when I'm checking each interval, all I really need to do is say if v dot contains val, then we want to return true. Okay, this is going to return a Boolean again. Okay, so we can do this because we are checking interval objects here. So for each interval v, we're going to use the contains method that we wrote for the interval class, and then we're just giving it the value that it's checking. Okay, so if it goes through the for loop here and it finds an interval that contains this value, it's going to return true. But if it goes through the entire for loop and it doesn't find that value in any of those intervals, we need to return false. Now, you want to make sure that this return is outside of the for loop. because we want it to go all the way through the intervals array list and check to see if any of those intervals contain value. We only want to return false if it's gone through the entire array list and wasn't successful in finding that value in any of those intervals. Okay, so that's all you had to do for question 2. For question 3, we're still working in our open set class here, but we're working on this get upper bound method. And what it does is it basically wants us to find the maximum upper bound out of all of the interval objects contained in that interval's array list. So one thing I want to point out here is that if we look at our interval class again, there was an accessor method written down here called get upper bound that just returns that upper. So we're going to be utilizing that here. We need to create some double variable because we need to return a double here that's going to be the maximum. So I'm just going to call it max, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just set it equal to the first upper bound in the array list. So I'm just going to set max equal to intervals dot get 0, not O, and then get upper bound. So that is going to set our maximum value equal to the first upper bound in the array list. After that, we're going to want to do a for loop again. So it's going to be basically the same for loop that I wrote above, okay, that for each loop. Okay, but this time we're going to be checking to see, oops, I forgot my if here, if the upper bounds, hope if I can type it right, get upper bounds. We're going to check to see if that upper bound of that interval is greater than our current maximum value. If it is, we are going to not return. We are going to set the max equal to v dot get upper bound. Okay, so all that's doing is it's checking to see, hey, is this new upper bound that we're looping through and finding, is it greater than what's currently set as our maximum? If so, we're going to set the maximum equal to that new value. Okay, so it loops through the entire intervals array list. It's searching for that maximum value. After it's completed the for loop, whatever is stored in max is going to be the largest upper bound out of all of those interval objects contained in the intervals array list. So all we need to do now is go ahead and return that maximum value. All right, guys, that was it for this FRQ. Hopefully you didn't feel like this one was too bad. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out and ask. Don't hesitate to let me know if you're having issues, and have a wonderful day.